Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
Man, I was just sacrificing everything for wrestling because I loved it.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wrestling Changed My Life. This is your host, Ryan Warner. My guest today is Phil Davis. Phil is a former Bellator light heavyweight champion. He's also a former NCAA champ for Penn State, where he was a 4-time All-American. Really fun conversation with Mr. Wonderful, and I hope you enjoy it. Fan of the Week goes to Nate Clements. You can find him on Twitter at LAW Coach Clem. Go Law Dogs, baby. Go Law Dogs. Thank you so much for tuning in, Nate. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to our online store. That's store.wrestlingchangemylife.com. We sold a lot of the OG t-shirts this week, folks. They come in blue, red, gray, and black. That's the OG t-shirt. Logo on the front, nothing on the back. Again, please don't feel obligated, but if you want to support the show, that's where you can do it. Keep up with the podcast outside of this episode by following us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, and you can always go to that lovely website, WrestlingChangeMyLife.com, for all past episodes. Now let's give it up for Mr. Wonderful, Phil Davis. Peace! Phil Davis, Mr. Wonderful. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. What's going on?
It's a lovely day here in Chicago. We're trying to fight through this winter, man. I know you're down in San Diego. What's the temperature
Man, hey,
like down there?
I'm down here fighting this winter too. Okay, listen, I woke up and it was like 57 degrees outside. That's cold, man. All right, so if anybody feels you right now, I feel you. Okay,
man, I appreciate that, especially someone who's from PA originally, and I know you know how bad those winters can get out there, man. So
yeah, it can get bad. It can get real bad.
Your empathy means a lot, sir. I appreciate it. So you're down in San Diego, professional fighter. You obviously wrestled at Penn State, 4-time All-American. I gotta start, man, with just this epic duel we had last Friday. What are your thoughts on that? Did you get a chance to watch it?
Oh yeah, you know I did. I watched it twice, and wow, I have so many thoughts. Let's just start at the top. So, obviously Penn State didn't win the duel, and still a little bit gutted about that. I think we definitely had some things go our way, but man, we lost a couple critical matches, and couldn't pull out the win. But I'll tell you what, Mark Hall, man, like, I feel for that young man. I saw him his freshman year. Bunch of buddy of mine, we got together. We went out to Iowa, and we were at the dual meet where they pulled him out of his red shirt for his first college duel. And I remember the duel because it was heated. It was heated. Penn State was number 1. Iowa was on the come up. And when they got to 174, Hall came out. Place went crazy. Oh, they pulled him out of his red shirt. And Mark Hall comes out and gets like, I mean, I forget exactly who he was wrestling, but he was wrestling an upperclassman, a senior, and Mark strikes first blood. He gets the first takedown, and then the ref goes 2 points, and then they have like a mat side announcer, and he says it over the loudspeaker, 2 points, Penn State takedown, and then the ref waves off the takedown. He's like, no, you know what, no control. And I'm like, yo, you've already said it on TV. You said it you said it in the stadium. You said it on the mat. Listen, when I hear 2 points and I'm in a scramble position, that's it. It's time to change. That I have to change my position after I get my points. That's the name of the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of the game. And if you just wave off the man's two, well, you know what? Now there wasn't any control. So, it's like, and there's times when you can make a mistake, but not really at that level, man. You really need to say two when you're sure the guy has two. And if you make a mistake, that's how you got to stand by it sometimes.
Especially in Carver.
It was wild. Especially Carver. It was really wild how much time went by before he called back the 2 points. And I'll be damned if that wasn't the 2 points that Mark Hall needed to win that match. Oh, man. And it's like all these different scenarios and situations that run and happen. And the craziest things seem to always happen in Carver. I just see it year after year. The one year we had Big Tens at Carver, and it was just the craziest stuff. Calls that you would never get anywhere else. And I mean that. Nowhere else.
I got to give it to Kale and the guys, though, because they're sitting there, and some of the stalling calls were atrocious. And Kale and the staff, they don't get up and go crazy. They just look at each other, and they almost laugh. They're like, if this is anywhere else, and I'm an Iowa fan, but if this is anywhere else, some of these match scores are drastically different.
Yes. I truthfully believe that is in many ways that wrestling in Carver as a Hawkeye, you can really set up a young wrestler to expect calls that he's not going to get anywhere else. He's not going to get those kind of calls at Big Tens. He's not going to get those kind of calls at Nationals. But you're in you're going to need those calls against the top guys in the division when it really matters.
Absolutely. And so do you think Hall got Carvered again, or that Kimmerer is just that good? Because it seemed like something happened to Hall early where he had that headlock, looked like it was over, and he was kind of bullying Kimmerer. Then just slowly but surely, man, something happened, and Kimmerer started gaining momentum, and before you know it, it wasn't that close of a match at the end.
You know what? I didn't get a chance to finish that thought. At least not the way I planned. Kimmerer, he is that good, but at the same time, I think there's, I feel like, and this is me, I spent limited time around Hall. We've had a couple brief running past each other's. So these aren't his thoughts, obviously, but man, I feel like he's just like, I'm just going to wrestle hard, and if I can't win because I'm going to get screwed, I'm going to get screwed. Just F it. I really feel like he expects, it just seems like he's, I feel like I've seen a representative sample, and you're right. I feel like I saw something happen. He was just like, God dang it. The calls are going to start going the other way soon. But Kimmerer definitely matched his intensity and with technique and intensity, and that he but at the same time, Kimmerer really is that good.
Yeah, I mean he's as solid as they come. Obviously a PA guy, so he's got that going for him. How many times did you wrestle in Carver back in the day?
I think at least 2, maybe 3. I feel like maybe there was a Big Tens there while I was in school. But I don't think I wrestled that one. No, I don't think I did. Oh, maybe there was one there. Yeah, two or three. And yeah, it's as hostile a place as you will ever see. It is, man, it is loud, it's noisy. I love how big the arena is. It is, man, it feels like they are on top of you. When you're on the mat, it's like they are hovering just above you.
I tell you, I grew up an Iowa fan. I was born and raised about an hour from there in Illinois. But then in college, I kind of went through a phase where I didn't like Iowa because I'd go to the duels and I'd hear the fans calling for stalling. And in my head, I'm like, that's not even close to stalling. And then on Friday, I was there. My brother and I went. We were like third row. And again, I'm like, God, some of these fans are absolutely out of their mind when they're calling for stalling. And so I kind of remembered why maybe I wasn't the biggest fan of the Hawk fans back in the day, because it's tough to listen to if you're going in just looking for good wrestling.
It is.
It's just God love them, but sometimes they're absolute maniacs out there. I don't know what they're watching to call stalling the way they are.
It's great. Legit, this happened to me, and I feel like similar situations happen. I was up by like 5 points, and whoever the guy was took one shot, and that shot pushed me close to the edge. And I had just like worked him to the edge, and it was like one shot. I was close to the edge, stalling. I was like, yo, I'm literally killing this guy. Like, you can't just call stalling off of one shot. He's supposed to shoot if he wants to take me down. Like, you can't call stalling off of one shot. What is wrong with you people? Like, yo, I got called for stalling. I take that personal. I was like, yo, I know when I'm tired. I'm not tired. I'm really working out here, man. Like, the stall calls attached to my feelings, guys. Just think about it.
Man, you're hurting the man's feelings here. I mean, I just sometimes I feel like they're trying to implement the push-out rule just with their own refs out there. But I know you mentioned it's a hostile place. You're one of the top pro fighters in the world, and man, you fought in some hostile places, one of which being Brazil. And I've heard just through past interviews that like the week, I don't know which time you went to Brazil when this happened, but like the week before, like a ref stabbed a player in Brazil, and this is like the environment you're going into. When was that fight, and what was the story there?
Oh, no. There wasn't a ref that stabbed a player. There was collectively, there was madness taking place. It was absolute madness. So it was my second time going down to Brazil, going down to Rio, and the week before I got out there, there were, I don't know why, but I add different cities to my, from going down to Costa Rica, I'll add that area of Costa Rica to my iPhone, so I'll have the weather, you know what I mean? Just get a feel for what I need to bring them, the news and everything else. Anyhow, there was a soccer match in which a guy received a yellow or a red card, and to say the least, he wasn't very impressed about it. So he goes up to the referee, he punches him, he's like, beating him up pretty good, I guess. And this referee has the wherewithal to reach down into his sock, and conveniently located there, he found a knife, and he stabbed the player. And my understanding is it was one stab, and the gentleman passed away. He collapsed and passed away. So that did not go over well in Rio with their soccer fans. They are, like any soccer fan, a little very involved in that game. And so they stormed the field and quartered this man, which when I read this, I didn't fully understand what that meant. I guess I've heard of it, but I didn't really internalize it. Well, I guess I should say I've never heard it used in this context with these people, like with people like that. They quartered him, meaning they cut off his arms and legs from the rest of his body. You've heard of like drawn and quartered?
Yeah.
Well, that's when you that I am familiar with. Unfortunately, that's when you're, attached to four horses and they pull you apart. That's drawn and quartered. They just quartered him, which made me think, it was crazy. This was a crazy story straight from jump. Ref gets punched. Then it gets even worse when he has a knife in his sock. But what made these people cut him into pieces? Like, that's your go-to? Like, that was their go-to. And so anyhow, long story short, I found out about this, and then the very next week, I'm supposed to fly down to Rio, where this took place, fight Lyoto Machida in HSBC Arena. This man is a national treasure, okay? And I'm just like, man, like, you know what? Why do I do this? Is it really worth all this? You know what I mean? Like, no, if it comes down to getting quartered, look, I'll take a dive, okay? Like, it's not that serious. Like, this is out of control. Like,
is that one of the fights where you left the family at home?
Well, the family was definitely at home on this one, but, yeah.
And then you won that fight, and it's like, what was the atmosphere like afterwards? Was it hostile? Did you have to run out of there, or were they respectful?
In the arena, it was not a happy time. No, we rushed straight out of that joint. It was walking in. There was this dude. It became kind of famous. There's a dude who would like snatch your hat off while you're walking to the cage, and at that time, you have all your sponsors on, and you have like a different sponsor hat on, and they pay you to wear those hats. Like, this dude was like snatching money off of people's heads. So he was like doing it to everybody up and down the fight card, but he didn't get my hat. he like lifted my hat up, I snapped it back, pop, got him. And so see now that he knows that I got him, I can never go back to Rio. He knows I know, Anyhow.
Dude, that's crazy shit. I've heard that they even have like evacuation plans for fighters if the worst should happen.
Oh, 100%. Oh, yes. Armed guards took us into the back, and I still didn't feel safe.
Oh my God, dude! What a crazy place. And so, was this UFC or Bellator?
This is UFC.
So this is in the golden era when you could still have sponsors. All that's changed now, right?
Oh yes.
And I'm sure we'll get into that stuff as we kind of move through this conversation here. But a lot of the folks listening to this podcast, Phil Davis, are wrestling fans. Obviously, hence the name of the show. You're, one of the most successful Penn State wrestlers. During your era, which is crazy to say because right after you left, shit took off out there. It got crazy, and they're still on that run. But you were a 4-time All-American, national champ, had some battles with Rochholt back in the day. But let's go way back before that, man. I mean, what kind of kid were you growing up, and where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right in the capital. And, man, I tell you, I really wish I had gotten started wrestling a little bit earlier. I got started in middle school. I started in 7th grade. And my only friend at the time, at least in school, his name was James Little, and he wanted to go out for the wrestling team. And I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, well, will you go with me? I mean, you don't have to practice or anything. I just don't want to be alone. I don't know anybody on this team. Could be anybody out here. I'm like, all right, yeah, that sounds reasonable. I'll go. And so I show up at practice with him. He gets changed, and he's working out, and the coach comes over, and he's like, hey, man, you can't just sit on the side. You got to join in. And I'm like, I'm good, man. That's ain't for me. And so he's like, nah, you can't sit here. You gotta work out. And so So I'm like, all right, man. I didn't even have a change of clothes. I remember I stole my brother's shirt because he had nice clothes. He had a job. I didn't. I'm in middle school, and so I stole his clothes, and I'm working out like wrestling in his shirt. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to get beat up for this. I am going to get beat down when I get home. And so I wrestle and I get all his shirt all dirty, and I'm all sweaty, and I get on the bus and I go home. And I remember I walked into the kitchen. I was telling my mom like everything that happened. She's like, man, all right, if you don't like it, then just finish the week and you can quit on Monday. I'm like, all right. I don't know how I got roped into going another couple of days. This was a Wednesday, and now my mom roped me in to Thursday and Friday. Like I just went for emotional support. I didn't sign up for this. I never signed up for this. Not one time did I say I wanted to do this. And and so I was like, all right, fine. I'll all right, Thursday, Friday, and then I'm done. And truth be told, I literally forgot to quit on Monday. And so, and that's a true story. I forgot to quit. So, that's very me. When you know me, that's very me to forget to quit. And here I am.
How do you mean that's very you to forget to quit?
I forget all sorts of things. Not even I remember unimportant things, but I'm very forgetful. I have to write things down.
Man, it's good to know there's two of us out there. I have a desk full of yellow sticky notes here, and some of my friends are convinced that I have some kind of memory loss because I'm writing things down all the time. But it's like the things I'm laser focused on, I'm good. But if not, I'm a space cadet like that. So good to know there's two of us out there.
Exactly. Oh, there's more than just two. But I take it as a blessing. I really do, because it gives me, especially in the lens of athletics, it gives me such a great. I believe it gives me an advantage because, I have a very narrow, I have very narrow memories of when I was bad at wrestling. And a lot of guys over the years, I noticed, they still remember those times where they got pinned and they lost this match or that match. And I'm like, I wrestled you before? I lost? Oh, wow. Okay. And I just go into that match, focus solely on that match and that wrestler at that time. And I go out and I perform much better. And I just take that to my advantage. I'm constantly willing to try everything in the arsenal versus, remembering every detail of every match I've ever been in.
So you were definitely not one of those kids where before a tournament you could rattle off stats and scores of the guys you were wrestling. You were just kind of going out there, having fun and ready to let it rip.
Exactly. And there were very few guys that were like that. I could tell you how a guy wrestled, but I couldn't tell you the scores and stuff like that. I could mimic their stance and how they move around, but I couldn't tell you the score or who he beat or what year, any of that.
What about a guy like, I never know how to pronounce his last name, Win Michalik.
Win Michalik, yeah.
Michalik. So your senior year going into the finals, you were 0-2 against him. You eventually won, but even someone like that, were you kind of relaxed and not really thinking about it, or did you guys study film a lot before going into that match?
See, prime example. Now, I may be conveniently forgetting that I wrestled him. I think I'm trying to think where I may have wrestled him. Maybe postseason. Did I wrestle him during the year at Central Michigan? I didn't know.
I got that from just listening to the broadcast. They go, Phil is 0-2 against Win. I did notice, I think, one year you wrestled him at the Nationals, but I didn't look at all the dual results. But I was watching the broadcast last night, and it wasn't a close match. You handled the match, but they go, yeah, he's 0-2 against him. And I'm like, shit, that's a pretty big deal. Going into your senior year against the guy you're 0-2 against, who's really kind of tough and gritty, that Midwesterner type of wrestler. So you definitely didn't study any film before that one.
No. Yeah, definitely did not. And I definitely no, I approached that match like he was a brand new wrestler, and expect anything, and just yeah, no, I didn't. I remember that match, and my feelings going into it, and hey, you're 0-2 against him so far. Those were definitely not my thoughts at all. I never thought that once. I don't think I knew that.
That's amazing to me. That is truly amazing to me.
I promise you, I did not know that. And it doesn't surprise me, because it doesn't. You saying that, it doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me. Wynn was he's a great wrestler, and he's one of those guys that he was immediately he was good. It wasn't like he came around his senior year and he started kicking butt. He was good all throughout. And yeah.
What were you thinking before that match? Do you remember kind of what your self-talk was and what your mindset was Saturday leading up to the finals?
Right. So in the first period, if I'm able to leave that first period winning, that is it. I'm always pretty dynamite in third period, and I'm usually pretty tough on top, usually able to score some points, and if not, I'm still able to ride you the whole time. So for me, the biggest thing was just walking through how I'm going to get that takedown in the first period and outwork them in the first period, and then just keep that train running off the tracks in the third.
So you're just focused on yourself at that point. What about should the worst happen? Should a negative thought slip through there? Was that ever something you battled with, or were you fairly optimistic going into big matches like that?
Yeah, still very, very optimistic. I mean, even giving up that first takedown, that's something I've also dealt with throughout my career, is that I was kind of a late bloomer as far as being a takedown guy. Always a tough mat wrestler, but I didn't really begin to take down the toughest guys until my probably by my sophomore year in college. So starting a match down 2 or 3 points was nothing. That was normal. I remember very vividly, I wrestled Clayton Foster from, where did he wrestle? Okie State. And Penn State was the number 2 team in the nation my senior year, and Oklahoma State was ranked number 1. And we had a duel against each other down in Stillwater. And going into that match, my coaches never do this. And they came to me and like, Phil, listen, we need you to pin. Like, don't play around this time. We need you to pin. Like, there's no other way. You have to get a pin. You cannot win this match. You have to get a pin. All right, man. All right. I can do that. And so I get into this match, Clayton, and man, he's tough and physical, and I don't think he was ranked very high at the time, but I think I'm pretty sure he All-American that year. And he took me straight down to my back in the first 30 seconds. And so, I roll off my back, and then we go out of bounds. And I just remember, I look up at my coaches, and I'm like, all right, guys, calm down now. Calm down. And I stand up. And then I take him down, and then I score, I think, a set of bat points of my own, and score another set, and then I eventually pin him. But that's just like, that's very, I don't want to say super typical, but that wasn't that wasn't anything that rattled me.
Coach Sutherland is absolutely losing his mind in the corner at this point.
Oh yeah. Dude. he's like, he's seeing the whole national title slip away. Like, no, you got to pin this guy.
Now, at this point, was Aaron Anspach on the team, or was he an assistant at this time, and he'd already graduated? I know he's one of your boys. Obviously, he helped us with this chat here. Was he around at that time, though?
Yeah, he was. He had already graduated, and he was sticking around grad assisting. So that was my senior year, and he wrapped up my junior year. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get him a medical 6 year. He's the perfect candidate for it, but I think it literally came down to one match, and that was the reason why he didn't get his medical 6 year. He should have been there for that our third place run, and had he been on that team, goodness sweeps, man, another guy in the national finals, that probably would have clinched it. But
that could have been a national title. I mean, this is before the Penn State era started, because the next year I think you guys fell to the top 10, but that senior year of yours, freaking third place on the trophy stand, first time in a while for Penn State.
First time in quite some time. Oh yeah, and and Aaron, he'd split he'd gone 2-1 against Dustin Fox from Northwestern, who eventually became the champion that year. So, I like my chances I'll take Aaron over anybody in the nation. He's just such an athlete. And I say that because as a big guy, he's just so darn quick and powerful. I don't think at any point I could really stop Aaron's double leg.
Really?
Yeah, man. Yeah, he would just run straight through me, and I'm like, golly. It was just very hard to stop. He didn't have to always get to your legs, but he would always run it down. He would just run it down. I'm like, God, can't do anything to stop this.
Couldn't be a nicer guy either. One of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. I randomly met him on a plane flying to Detroit one morning for work, and I saw his cauliflower ear. I sat down next to him, and next thing I know, he's like, yeah, he didn't say this, but I looked him up. I'm like, shit, that guy got second for Penn State. That's pretty cool, and we've been friends ever since, man. He's a good dude.
Oh yeah, he's a great dude, a really great dude. Speaking of cauliflower ear, I recently got my very first piece. I have the best ears for my head. I have a big head, but I have fairly small ears, and I'm gonna sit back really tight on my head. So I've never got cauliflower ear until about a week ago. I have a little tiny little bubble behind my ear, and I was like, man, this, I don't even know what this is. I think I'm going to go to a doctor. This isn't maybe a quarter of cc worth of fluid. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. I need to get this drained. I'm an adult. Okay, who nobody gets freaking cauliflower for the first time at 35?
Well, I saw that you just got the new pair of Rudis shoes, and so I'm like, man, is he still scrapping like a wrestling practice? I mean, I'm sure you do as part of your training, but how much are you guys wrestling down there at Alliance?
Yeah, we're wrestling at least a couple days a week, and I'm also coaching high school wrestling at a local high school here in my area, so in San Diego. So these days I'm wrestling quite a bit.
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. I used to go down to San Diego a lot for work, and at the time, Poway was really good. Are they still a power out there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those dogs.
Yeah, they got they have a great program, and they have really good roots. So they have a great feeder program and great youth program. So yeah, they're just a perennial powerhouse. But I will tell you, the wrestling club we're working with, they're coming along, and we're really pumped because they just beat Poway recently at our youth tournament. So
wow,
you just keep an eye out for the SoCal Grapplers, my friend. We're on the come up.
Will do, brother. Will do. So are you a California man now, staying in San Diego for the foreseeable future?
For the foreseeable future, and I say that solely because my wife, she's like born and raised in San Diego. And
oh, you're never leaving, man. You're never leaving.
She's just not. She's not gonna do it.
No,
she's just not. She's never seen this, and this is true. She has never seen snow fall from the sky. So I'm like, oh.
She's not missing anything.
She
ain't missing shit. Let me tell you right now, it sucks. I lived in California for 5 years and moved back to Chicago about two years ago, and woo, man, this is the time of year what really gets you. February, March, just it's not even cloudy out. It's just a gray haze in the sky for months and months and months, and we're in the thick of it right now, Phil Davis.
Oh man, that wind will cut you in half.
Ooh. Now you're in San Diego because that's your fight camp, and I want to transition to your MMA career a little bit here. So you're 35. I mean, God, I feel like you've been fighting forever. You were in the UFC for 12, 13 fights, and then Bellator, and then you just re-signed with Bellator. Let's go back to the origin story, though. I heard that like at a young age you had an encounter with Randy Couture at I don't know if it was at a UFC event or what, but he put some hands on your collar, and rumor has it that's how you got interested in MMA. You know, correct me if I'm wrong there, but is that how it all started for you?
Well, so I definitely met the Randy the Natural Couture at it was actually at the U.S. Open, and so a bunch of buddies of mine, we would always pull our money together in college because none of us could afford a pay-per-view, and we watched the fights, you know, all get together and watch fights at a buddy's house, and that was our routine. And you know, honestly, I used to always say, man, these guys are crazy. These guys are crazy. And then sometime, I guess, you know, I just watched it too much, and come my senior year, it stopped looking crazy and looked like a viable idea. So be careful watching MMA because you may grow to like it, maybe too much. But yeah, you know, so I met Randy Couture, and I was like, dude, do you mind if I get a picture? So, and he's a super cool guy. You know, he's kind of a man of few words, but you know, all very encouraging, and so he's like, yeah, man, you know. So I take my picture, and I'm like, oh, Nick, do you mind if you just kind of like grip me up just a little bit? Like, yeah, I want to be able to tell a crazy story with this. So he's like, yeah, for sure. So he just grips me up by the collar, and we just scripted it all. He just gripped me up, and I was like, don't hurt me. It was great. Yeah, he's definitely one of the people who I well, of course we followed all the wrestlers. Anybody who was a college wrestler or international wrestler, we definitely followed those guys throughout their MMA career. So we watched a lot of Randy Couture's fights and Josh Koscheck and you know anybody doing big things in MMA, and that was pretty much it after that. After college,
man. But even back then, it was still pretty underground. I mean, it wasn't as underground as the early 2000s, but it wasn't anywhere close to mainstream like it is now, let alone on ESPN. And you've seen it grow just leaps and bounds over the years. How did you get down to Alliance, and what was kind of your first introduction to the UFC like? What was that experience like?
Oh, man. So when so after I graduated, I stuck around Penn State, and I was training, and got a manager and former Penn State wrestler, Chad Dubin, amazing guy. He just he's a serial entrepreneur, so he started managing me, and he's like, well, if you're going to be here for a while, I might as well, you know, get you some training. So he bought a local gym right on College Ave in Penn State, and we turned it into an MMA gym, and we started running kind of like wrestling camps, but for MMA. And at one of the camps, we invited Dominic Cruz, and he came out, and he was we had a bunch of little guys, and he would spar with them. And Dominic Cruz was on his deathbed. He got so sick, and so I took him into my house. Paul Bradley kicked him out of his house. Yeah, you can get on Paul Bradley if he's ever on the show, because he kicked Dominic Cruz out of his house. He was so sick. I was like, nah, man, I'll take care of you. And so, so I'm taking care of Dominic. And he's like, oh, man, thank you so much. Like, this is the sickest I've been as long as I can remember. And you just looked out for me. Like, no worries, man. And so he tells me, hey, I have a friend in San Diego named Brandon Vera who, man, he would benefit from, a wrestler your caliber a lot. And, you could work with him in your stand-up, and you guys would be great training partners for each other. So I was like, all right. And shortly after that, Brandon reached out and said, hey, I'll pay for your flight, and I'll put you up, and I'll take care of you while you're here. So I was like, all right, cool. So I came out, and I knew nothing of Brandon Vera. I didn't know who he was, or I didn't know anything. I just packed my bag and said, all right, I'll check it out. And, of course, San Diego was awesome, and Brandon Vera turned out to be an amazing training partner. He has a wrestling background. He wrestled for Air Force, and he wasn't necessarily a world beater at wrestling, but afterwards he got into Muay Thai, and man, he was exactly the training partner I hoped to get. He was just somebody who could challenge me in wrestling, but then also kick my butt in grappling and stand up every single day, So, I mean, it was a long time before I got a solid win against him. So, and that to me felt like that was where I needed to be. So I came out, visit, had a great time, and shortly after that I was, packed my bags for good, moved to San Diego.
So Dom Cruz is on his deathbed at your apartment. I can just picture him on the couch, reaching up, you got to train with Brandon Vera. And so it's he's on his deathbed at your house. He mentions this guy's name. You have no idea who he is. You fly out there. You guys are scrapping, and you're like, shit, this is where I belong. And next thing you know, you move to San Diego. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
God,
yep.
That's awesome. And now you're a staple in the Bellator circles. I wanted to ask you about this because I'm, legitimately curious. What makes Scott Coker such a fighter's manager? Everything you hear about the guy, people love the guy. If you're a fighter, and kind of what he does for the guys.
He's just very straightforward. There's not as much politics when you're fighting with Scott. You appreciate that, and he's very professional. I just come to really enjoy the way he runs his programs, and I've been a fan of Scott Coker since he was running Strike Force, and I was in the UFC at the time, and I was like, man, this guy's all right. It's regardless of win or loss, when you're out there, you're fighting, you're really creating art, and most people just aren't even able to comprehend what is going on, let alone the tactics and the techniques that you're using. And, he's not one of the guys that wants to talk bad about his fighters if they lose. He just, he'll talk good about the guy who won, and that's fair.
Right.
That's fair. It's I say all the time that when you look at MMA as an art, then it really gives you kind of the appreciation you should have for it. If I walk into an art museum and say, hey, why is this Jackson Pollock painting so expensive? Why is it worth $100 million? And they could give me some, I was going to say excuses, but they could give me some reasoning and some rationale why that would be true. Why that would be true. And at some level, I'm thinking in my head, this is like scattered paint on the canvas. I feel like I can do this. But if I tried, I also know that I couldn't truthfully reproduce something that he did. I know that.
Right.
But it still feels like something that you could do. And no one in art will be like, oh, this is a piece of crap. You know, but that's just not the way people talk about mixed martial arts. And a lot of people have, you know, had some fights, so whether it be on the street or what have you, and they feel like, oh yeah, I could do this, and that's the furthest from the truth. you could not, sir. This is different. and so Scott just does a great job of promoting his product and talking great about his fighters, and you don't have to talk bad to talk good.
Yeah, it seems like it's all love and positivity most of the time coming out of that organization. And I've read that you're super analytical, and you talked about fighting being an art and how you see different things. I mean, I don't know if you've had the 10,000 hours of MMA training that you thought you'd have by this point. I think the article I read, it was like 2012, so I think you're there. But man, I think one of the things I'm most curious in is, what do you know now that coming into it as a wrestler you just had no idea? Or you look at guys like Bo Nickel or Couture, it sounds like they're going to be coming in to MMA, and like you're a vet and you've had that 10,000 hours of MMA training. What are some of the biggest things that you noticed that you had to shore up, or that you didn't really expect coming into the fight game almost a decade ago now?
The whole rules, the rules of mixed martial arts are flimsy at best and very flexible in in actuality. And coming from a wrestling background, the rules are, some of them are subjective. And even when I feel like they can be bent, they certainly can't be broken. So if I'm wrestling in this kind of doesn't even matter. Let's say we're in Carver Hawkeye and I get lifted and slammed. That's a very, in wrestling we understand, hey, you slam the guy, and if he doesn't stand up, you lose the match. Those are the rules. Those are the rules. We don't always agree, but those are the rules. And not so in MMA. The rules are very, even more subjective than wrestling. The rules they're just so pliable.
Fluid at best.
Fluid at best. And, everything from like weigh-in, if you weigh in overweight 1/10 of a pound, any measurable amount over the stated amount, you, sir, are overweight. You will not be competing this weekend. That is it. That is it. There's no, oh, but this, or oh, but that, or there is none. There's none. There's none to be had. And I like that. Everybody respects that. Not one person in the sport thinks that you should get a match if you didn't weigh in exactly 0-0 on the dot. That's just a given. And in mixed martial arts, it's like, oh, the guy weighed in 6 pounds over. Let's see if we can still make the match. What? 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 What are you saying?
How is that even possible?
What? Yeah. And what's crazy is, like, people will say, oh man, this guy weighed in 6 pounds over, and so-and-so was probably just scared to take the fight anyway. I'm like, 6 pounds? You don't even know 6 pounds? You didn't try. You didn't try to make weight. 6 pounds over? Half pound over, you tried to make weight, you missed. 6 pounds? Like, that's not your definition of trying and my definition of trying are wildly different. Wildly different. And so that's a big part of it. And
well, even with like eye pokes though, it's like,
see, I was getting to that.
Yeah, it's like, is that a point or is it not a point?
you got to get poked 3 times in the eye before you get a point, which, that you need your eyes to wrestle. I mean, to fight. There's not 3. There's no give up 3 eye pokes, man. It just doesn't exist. Like, what planet do you live on where a guy can get violently poked in the eye 3 times and still maintain accuracy? It's, or even, shots to the nuts or grabbing the fence, or, I mean, you can just name any rule and it's just, I guess you shouldn't do that, but you can definitely do it. There's just no, or even, testing positive, that those fights get moved to a no contest, which I think, again, is just absolutely crazy. If 2 guys are competing, and one of them fails his drug test, it is absolutely obvious who should become the winner, to me at least. And in MMA, it's like, well, let's just call it a no contest. No contest? What does that even mean? It's crazy to me. So, in a lot of ways, you kind of have to lower your expectations. Even on the other side of the athlete side, and at a wrestling tournament, weigh-ins will be conducted absolutely on time, if not a minute or two early. And MMA, I remember my first fight in the UFC. Oh man, let's go back to my first fight. They said weigh-ins were going to be at 4. And so, I'm cutting some weight, and I get there. I'm there 3:45, maybe 3:30. At 4 o'clock, I'm looking around, and there's maybe another guy in the room, maybe one man out of the whole fight card. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? We're in the wrong room. And so I'm getting upset. I'm calling people, and they're like, no, you're in the right place. I guess we'll start here shortly. And start here shortly? Man, it's 10 after. What are you talking about? Start here shortly? What? And so you're not even here. Then come to find out, get there, the commission, they show up at like 4:45. They wanted everybody in the room by 4. The commission was late. Weigh-ins got started at like 5:30. Then they went and ordered the fight card. I mean, you didn't wait until at least 6 o'clock, 6:15. And I'm like, yo, how is this? How are you doing this? And it's just so many. I mean, it's just very different.
I've heard
very
that
different from
the practices too, though. Like I've heard, I can't remember who it was. Someone on the Joe Rogan podcast. They're a wrestler, and they said that the first time they went to, I remember who it was. It was Askren going out of Florida to American Top Team. Like he shows up at 2 o'clock. His practice starts at 2. Guys start rolling in at like 2:45. I think it was a jiu-jitsu class. Like the Brazilians are kind of rolling in a little late. Next time they start at 2. He's like, what the hell's going on here? I don't know if it's a little bit different down at Alliance, but I've heard that's another big difference too. It's just not the structure of the practices and the workouts are kind of a little bit looser in that sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. We go at 10:30, and I mean, I would say typically practice starts around 10:40. So we're still not wrestling prompt, but we certainly we're not the start an hour later crew. We typically are done before noon. So that's we're fairly we start very close to time, which is again that's unusual for other people in our area. They'll show up later. Oh, I thought practice was at 10:30. It was. it was.
We started, dude. We're going. Does the man himself, Jocko Willenick, does he ever roll in to the gym you train at? Or have you ever sparred with that absolute beast of an individual? I know he's down in San Diego.
So he's mostly at Victory, so he's across town. But yeah, I've rolled around with him a bunch over the years, and man, I didn't even know he's this like international celebrity that he is until probably a couple years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I ran into him. I was coaching this girl at a wrestling tournament, and I show up, and Jocko's there with his daughter, and I'm like, hey, how you doing, bud? And this and that. We're talking about, the fight game, and wished him well, and got on my way, and somebody else was like, dude, was that Jocko? I'm like, yeah, it was Jocko. You know him too? And because I only know him from, jiu-jitsu practice. He's, class. I'm thinking he's a regular dude, former, SEAL, that's a big deal, but not something that you should know his name for. And like, no, man, he has like the second, third best podcast out there. I'm like, really? Oh, that's very big. and so I look up his podcast, and before I get to his podcast, I see his books, and I'm like, New York Times bestseller, Jocko. Dang, all right. Yeah, just complete shell shock. So yeah, I read his books, and I'm like, man, this guy's the man. He's the real deal.
He just looks so just tough, dude. Like just tough as freaking nails when you're going with them. And I know you've rolled with the best there is, and you survived 5 years of a Division I college schedule. But I mean, that guy just seems like he's got that old man strength to the nth degree.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, look, his looks aren't deceiving at all. He is exactly as strong as he looks. Yeah, he's he's a hard worker, obviously, and he's but I tell you, out of everything that you may know or should know about Jocko, here is what I will tell you about him. That I think is important. He said to me a long time ago, and this kind of stuck with me, and later on, after I read his book, Extreme Ownership, it has really resonated with me. So he said to me, mind you, he's just a guy in a gym at this time, right? He's just a dude. And obviously he's really good at grappling, but I was getting ready for a fight, and it was early in my UFC career, and I was probably 2 or 3 fights deep and all wins. And he said, Phil, I've seen a lot of guys get to where you are right now, and man, just whatever you do, just don't stop. Just don't stop working hard, showing up early. And don't stop working, man. You're doing great, and just don't stop. And I was like, all right, I didn't plan on stopping, but later on I look back and I'm like, man, no one else gave me that sort of encouragement. Just a reminder of, hey, other people have been here before, and now they're not. Just keep doing what you're doing, and if you want to get to the top. And later on, when I'm reading his book Extreme Ownership, and man, this guy is it's great that he says to be he says that he's a great encourager on paper, but he truthfully is he's definitely a guy who practices what he preaches, and he's definitely a leader, and someone who lifts up the people around him. And I really appreciate that about him.
Do you think he meant don't stop being you, don't stop like actually training, or don't stop on your values and principles as you kind of skyrocketed into the limelight?
He just meant, just kind of falling into the party culture, and,
right.
Reaching a certain level of visibility, and, failing to continue to work hard to get to the next level.
Yeah, and obviously with the wrestling background, I assume it just, it comes with a humbleness that a lot of people who haven't done it don't have. And that's probably why you've had the career you have. Phil, I know we're winding down here. I just have 3 quick questions. These are more like kind of rapid fire questions. Then we'll let you go. Is that cool?
Yeah. Fire them off.
First question is, back to the NCAA match your senior year when you won it, the announcer said that one of your hobbies was sewing, and they showed a patch that you had sewed on your shoe. The other announcer didn't believe him, so I got to know, man, true or false? Are you someone who sews, and did you sew that patch on your shoe back in 2008?
No, I'm not.
Do you just mess with them?
Seamstress by, yeah. but I did. So it was like a big deal at Penn State because I was at the time I was the only one on the team that wore 14s, right? And so everybody had everyone head to toe Nike, and I had gone through maybe two pairs of shoes that year, and so they were all out of 14s in the equipment room. And so and this is like, we had one dual meet left and then Big Tens and Nationals. So my coach is like, dude, you gotta, all right, either way, whether we order a pair of shoes or what do you want to do? And I was like, man, I hate those Nike shoes to begin with. Not Nike shoes in general, but just that wrestling shoe that they gave us that year. That particular one was not my favorite. And so he was like, all right, Phil, just get whatever you feel comfortable in, and I'll just deal with the administration because they're going to call. And so I went down to like the local wrestling store and got a pair of shoes, and they were Asics. They were Kales. And so he's like, anywhere you can, just take off Asics wherever you can. We're going to have to cover it up so we don't get in trouble with the administration. So I sewed over top of Kale's name and then put my name on top. I was hoping Cal didn't feel too slighted. I don't think he cared, but yeah. So, but hey, I'm doing it for the team, But yeah, so I did sew a patch on my shoe, but I'm nothing like a seamstress.
Got it.
It just kills me, right? Because you do this interview right before you after you complete the semifinals, and they interview all the finalists, and they're like, "Tell us something we don't know about you." I'm like, "Man, I don't know, man. Like if there's something you don't know, chances are I don't want you to know it, right?" So,
right.
Like how do I tell you something you don't know? Like I don't.
Like you're expecting to get vulnerable right after one of the biggest matches of your life. You're sitting down in an interview chair and somebody you don't even know is like.
Yeah. So I just did what I do, and I gave him something funny. And of course, my mother. So my mom is like, my grandmother was like, she was a professional seamstress. She was amazing. She could do anything with a needle and some thread. And so growing up, we would have some singer magazines and like different, what are those called? Like the patterns and whatever. My grandma, she could make you a new shirt. You just tell her what you like. And so those sort of things were around the house. So I just it's like, yeah, man. I got a sewing circle at the house, and, we just get together every Thursday night and we do our thing. And they're like, "No way!" Yeah, man, that's real. That's real.
Oh my God!
This guy's crazy. This man is crazy.
You'll have to go back and watch that match just to hear the audio of the broadcasters, because the one guy is convinced that you're dead serious. The other guy is like, there's no way he's serious about the sewing circle on a Thursday night.
Oh yeah. I remember that.
It was funny.
No,
man.
I think he's just having some fun. I don't think he is.
Well, wrestlers are always so serious, you know. It's good to have someone like you come through and lighten it up a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, wrestling is very serious, especially when you got those big matches on the line. People are very rigid and they're just super focused on that match.
Right. Well, I had to know, man. Next question is, will we ever see you versus one John Jones? I know there's been some commentary back and forth over the years. Obviously, you're in a different organization, but if you're a betting man, do you think we ever see you versus John Jones?
Ooh, man, I would love that. It's so hard to say. I would love to compete against John Jones. I think as the sport grows bigger, there will become more of a need to have that cross promotion, fight. And I think that's something that may still be a possibility down the road. But that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome if it were to happen. I can't say for sure whether that will happen, before I'm done competing. But
right.
I certainly wouldn't rule it out either.
I'd love to see it happen, man. And the last thing that we always wind down with, it's the name of this podcast, how did wrestling change your life? Or maybe better for you is, how has wrestling enabled you to have a successful fighting career? Or however you want to take that. That's usually how we sign this thing off.
Yeah, man. So, wrestling absolutely changed my life because, there's a lot of things as a kid you just don't know about yourself. You're still growing and learning about yourself and about life. And I'm kind of an obsessive person. When I do something, I really do it. And I just hadn't found that thing, and school wasn't that thing for me. And it's crazy because I really do enjoy learning, and now as an adult, I enjoy learning. School just wasn't that thing. And but wrestling was. And if you want to be a wrestler in college and in high school, you got to keep your grades at a reasonable place, and that was enough reason for me to be a little bit more serious in school. But with that, I learned so much more about myself. Before long, I was just sacrificing everything for wrestling because I loved it. I would, work out late at night, early morning. I didn't miss a practice. I would get in extra practices. I had a wrestling club that I would join locally. Me and Aaron Osbach flew down to Disney Duels and kicked butt on that travel team. Then I joined another team out in Pittsburgh with Jake Herbert and Mark McKnight and I was just wrestling with the best guys, and it was just any way I could keep doing it. I was in love with the sport, and I remember I had reached a level that was, for most people it would be a little much, but not really for me. So I would get up and I would need to lose weight, but I just needed to run. And it was snowing out, and snow was, I think, it was probably up to my knees.
Wow.
But it didn't matter. I got out, and I was running, and I had this sweet run I used to do. I lived right on State Street in Harrisburg, and that's right in front of the Capitol Rotunda. So I would run about a mile down to the Capitol building, and I would run up around the Capitol steps like Rocky, and then I would run down the steps and run back to my house. It was a nice little 2-mile loop, and I would get home at like 2 a.m, and my mom waited for me, and she was like, you can't do this anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you just can't like go running at 2 a.m. dangerous. And I'm like, man, anybody out at 2 a.m. they're not going to look for the closest guy to mug who's just running. Like,
Why were you out at 2 in the morning?
Why?
Yeah, you were just felt the need to get out there?
I would get home from wrestling practice around 7, and then, eat a little dinner and do some homework. And I don't know, man. There was just no time. There was no time. It's kind of proof of my obsession with the sport and how I felt about it. There was just no time that was off limits. There was just no time that I thought I could not dedicate to wrestling. And so, so it just, I did it once and it felt good, and I just never stopped. I just kept doing it. And, so my mom bought a treadmill for the house and everything else I needed. And, it was great to have that kind of support, from my parents. Like, she saw something that she didn't like, and she was like, all right, cool. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't spend, and treadmills at that time were fairly expensive. So I knew my mom, she really meant it, and she knew that there was no way to stop me from running at that time. There was just no way of talking me out of it. And she just fed my crazy by getting me a treadmill, and there we go. I'm back at it.
You were possessed, man, and I couldn't think of a better way to wind this down. Dude, that was awesome. Phil Davis, you're a bad man. Can't wait to watch you again. Thank you very much for taking the time today to chat. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate you.
And all great things must come to an end. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us a review, give us a rating, and share this with your friends. It would mean the world to us. Thanks for listening to Wrestling Changed My Life.